Now, because the NPKTT was a project, it was always understood that it was interim in nature. It was never at any stage understood to be a permanent kind of setup. And I must distinguish between a team at this stage to clarify my point. It was never established as a unit. It was established as a team, actually a task team. Now, and there's a difference between a team and a unit in subs. And I'm explaining that because at one point when the commission was on and Major General Van Rooyen was asked a specific question in this regard, she said, if I remember correctly, she said there is no difference between a unit and a team. And there is a difference. Now, the NPKTT was established as a project. It was allocated a specific budget taken from various programs at the time. In other words, it was not budgeted for in a normal way where you budget for a program in a department. It had a team that just been set up mid-year, and then a budget had to be found to make it move on as required. Now, as such, like the principles that apply to all other projects of government, it would require periodic extensions or assessments, not extensions, but periodic assessments. It would require a budget to run. It would require a period which would be at which it will end. There's no project that I'm aware of in government that runs indefinitely. They are all time-bound. Now, the initial mandate of the NPKTT was actually for 6 months, not 6 years, 6 months, from July 2018 to the end of the year. It was then extended from January to July 2019. And thereafter, they decided that if any extension, it would be annual. But initially, it was 6 months. That's why at the end of the first 6 months, there was an assessment. And it was decided consciously that there would need to be an extension, which was for another 6 months. Now, in 2020, there was COVID in the country, and there was no assessment that was made of the PKTT in that year. The following year, 2021, an assessment was conducted. And as required, and an extension signed off by the National Commissioner, and the National Political Killing Task Team was ultimately appointed or apportioned its funding for the relevant year because of its extension. Now, beyond 2022, because this was an extension between 2021 and 2022, there was no further extension that was sought. In the same manner, I should qualify that, as it had happened before. And there's marked differences when you look at the previous extensions and after 2022. As a result, the NPKTT continued to operate without a required assessment and renewal for more than 2 years. And I'm advised that the relevant expenditure during this period beyond 2022 on the NPKTT is irregular under the PFMA, Act 1 of 1999. So what I'm explaining here is that the National Political Killings Task Team was a project. It had a project leader. It was not a unit in SAPS, and it had no budget allocated, but budget had to be found from other programs, even during extensions, to fund it. And it had a clear objective. And it had to be subjected to regular assessments. And costs had to be calculated. At each time there would be an extension, just like all other projects of government. And it was time bound all the time. From the time it was conceptualized. It was never an open-ended. It was 6 months, and next 6 months, and next a year, and then next a year, but after 2022, there were no longer, I would say, proper assessments in the true sense of the word.
Thank you, Minister. You then have a subtopic, but before we get to that subtopic, at paragraph 31, you mentioned that you are advised. Are you speaking about advice that you had received at the time when you were considering the PKTT or having regard to the PKTT, or now that it was in violation?
I'm talking about now.
Now,
Yes.
Okay. You may proceed to the subtopic, which is the shift towards permanent structures. And you do set out here